So great to see you all. This is traditionally quite a small festival in the festival calendar, but actually, yeah, so it's good to see a good number of you here today, and perhaps that says something about, in a way, how the theme of Parinirvana Day, the theme of death, has been brought home to us, perhaps a bit more strongly than usual in this past year. So I'll just outline the program because it's changed slightly, and it's still a bit of an approximate program. So I'm going to talk around the theme, probably for about 40-45 minutes. And then we'll have a little, then we're going to hear from a couple of people. We're going to hear from Sandra and Vajradevi for maybe 5 or 10 minutes each. Just so you get a glimpse, if you like, of how how the theme speaks to them, either currently or perhaps, threads through a life. They'll have their own ways into the theme, as we all would if we were to give that talk. So take it as read that there will be leg stretches involved somewhere along the line. And then from around 11, we may be joined by some people from the drop-in, though I see a number of them here already. So we might not have that many extra people joining us at 11. But from 11, a bit after 11, Jayaratna is going to take hold of that thread, and we'll do some meditation within that, and he'll introduce a practice. I'll leave him to say any more about what he'll be doing, and then we'll have a bit of a break. We're going to experiment a bit with we can have a tea break, so you can have a screen break if you like. But you may want to stay on screen, and if there's lots of people on screen, then it's possible that we'll just form a couple of breakout rooms. So if you like, you can just take your tea to a breakout room and have a tea break. So it won't be somewhere where you will discuss the theme necessary, unless that's what naturally comes out. It's in their informal sorts of rooms. And then from about 12:15, we'll have a ritual in 2 parts, really. So the first part is a way remembering or members of the Sangha who have lost people who are important to them, and not only people, actually, beings who are important to them in the last year. We'll hear a little bit about some of those people, and by the people who love them, and perhaps see an image in some cases. So that will be the first part of the ritual. That will be sort of framed around a brief meditation and a chant, and then we'll go on to the second part of the ritual, which I'll explain later, and that will end the day. So timings are appropriate, but we hope to be finished by around 1 o'clock. So I called this day the Great Transformation, Parinirvana Day, the Great Transformation, and that's I think it was just how I was feeling about it at the time, just the potential for death, this thing in our lives that for most of us, at least at some points, is really difficult, or is painful, or is associated with strong loss. Has this potential point in our spiritual life, and I wanted to talk a bit about that. I'm just going to change so I'm not looking at myself. Thank you. That's better. So I was thinking that death is one great transformation, but the great transformation perhaps we've already experienced is that of life. And I've been there's a band, a folk band I really like called Mobius Loop, and they sing a line in one of their songs called "One Becoming Two, and Then Becoming One Again." And I really like this. The singer is a young mother of a child her first child died at the age of 10 months or something, and then the second child who's living. But this sense of one becoming two, and then that great change at birth to becoming one again. So completely natural, but extraordinary as well, an extraordinary thing. And I know many of you listening have experienced that. I haven't myself. I have lots of sisters who have. Yeah. But also that extraordinary process from life to death. And yeah, my own experience of this was watching my mother. I wasn't actually there at the moment of her death, but seeing her for a long time very, very sick and looking very close to death. She clearly was very close to death. And yet that moment, once she had died, even psychically, even without seeing her in my own mind, completely different, an extraordinary change, but a completely normal and natural change or transformation. But it was strange in my own mind. It was strange what a leap it felt, that leap from life to death. So yeah, there's the two sides, if you like, of there's life and death, but then there's the two sides in the way that we often relate to death. And I put them in what I wrote about. I put them. We can experience death as a tragedy and an opportunity. We might think that in the Buddha's time, it was very much seen in terms of practice, in terms of the Buddha's teachings on impermanence and the Buddha's teachings around praticca samuppada, around that things are dependent upon causes and conditions. When those causes and conditions cease, when the fuel runs out, then they go into change. And that's what happens, the change between life and death. And that was very strongly what the Buddha taught. And yet it wasn't the only way that the Sangha sort of responded to his teachings or to the Buddha's, the prospect of the Buddha's death. Because Parinirvana Day is all about the Buddha's death. So at the Buddha's death, he urged Ananda and the other disciples not to weep and mourn him. But they did weep and they did mourn him. At least Ananda did. We know from the records that Ananda, his very close friend and companion for many, many years, did. And the Buddha was a bit brusque with him. And he says, "Enough, Ananda, do not grieve and lament. Have I not warned you about this before? We must lose and be deprived of and separated from everything pleasant and dear. How else could it be otherwise?" I love that. How else could it be otherwise? And then he continues in a very kindly way. He says, "For a long time, Ananda, you have attended me helpfully, gladly, and wholeheartedly. You have done well, Ananda. Keep on applying yourself and soon you will be free." So he has both messages. He has the sort of strength of the teaching and this very sort of encouraging, slightly more sort of feelingful, keep going, Ananda. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. So Ananda's response, I think probably many of us can identify with a feeling of loss and grief. And yet perhaps there's also something in us that does accept that death is a normal part, a universal happening that somewhere we know, and there's some degree of acceptance that it happens to all of us. So another figure within the tradition, and this is moving perhaps slightly closer to the tradition of the Bardo, which we're going to be looking at this morning. And this is the figure of wrathful Vajrapani. So if you haven't come across him, I haven't got an image with me. It's a shame because I have got some at home. He was the figure that I meditated on for a number of years. And so he's huge, and he's blue, and he's sort of got dreadlocks that come out here, and he's surrounded by flames, and he wears a tiger skin. The tiger skin symbolizes having overcome fear. You wear what you've overcome, apparently is the symbolism. And the flames symbolize transformation. So he's a wisdom figure. And he carries, his name, Vajrapani, the protector of the Vajra, the protector of the diamond thunderbolt. And I wanted to have the biggest Vajra I could find, which I think Amritamati gave me, actually, a long time ago, symbolizing symbolizing this determination, the strength and determination, the indestructibility of the Vajra. And it's said that Vajrapani, on hearing about the Buddha's death from one of the realms, the cosmic realms, he let fall his Vajra on the ground, and the universe shuddered from one end to the other. So you get the sense that this isn't in a way, the Vajra is representing the sort of psychic force, psychic sort of power of his energy. He's a Buddha, a Bodhisattva of energy in pursuit of the good. And yet his disturbance, his sadness, if that's what it was, you get the sense it's not personal. It's like a Buddha has gone from the world, and that is a huge loss. So there's a loss in that sense, a loss that actually, the loss the Buddha described upon losing his two main disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. The good has gone from the world. Forces for good are no longer present. Yes, so going to be looking at some verses from this book. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it has several verses in it. One of them is the six, what are they called? The main verses of the 6 bardos. Okay. So I wanted to look at those because I think these are a way into looking at that potential of death, either when we're relating it to our own grieving process about somebody else, but particularly in relation to our own practice. How do we relate to our own death? So I want to say first a little bit about what a bardo is, because it's perhaps maybe a word we use a little bit, but not much. So it symbolizes a gap or an in-between space, a space of potential. And along with it, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, goes a whole lot of imagery and symbolism of that moment of opportunity in different parts of our lives. So the most, the usual way that we look at it is in terms of the moment of death. But I think in Triratna we have quite a helpful tradition of, in a way, the teaching of the gap in between one moment and the next. A teaching when you are able to recognize your own reactivity in the mind and able to recognize it from something that's not caught in craving or aversion or delusion. So it's a moment of clarity, a moment of potential to see more clearly. There's a lovely line in another of the Bardo verses that I think speaks to me of this place or space of potential. It says, "Help me cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddha state." So apart from bringing up for me images of quite sort of mythic journeys, if you like, I think of Sam and Frodo going in search of that ring, going through all those trials and tribulations. So help me cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddha state. Yeah, so maybe that's something about a moment of potential. If you like, it's within our grasp, but we may not be able to reach it in that moment. So how we navigate the journey, how we navigate the pathway in the moment is significant, is important. Perhaps how we walk between that sort of human response, the human response of grief, of loss, of the heart opening that can bring, along with the truth of death, the truth that this is what happens, this is what the Buddha was talking about. And the need to see both sides, to walk both sides, really. If we only take the absolute view, we take the Dharma view, I think there's a danger of leaving out feeling, leaving out that opportunity for death, for grief to open the heart in some way. And if we only feel, and at times we will do that, at times the strength of feeling is such that we're likely to be quite overwhelmed by feelings. I think it's a question of just keeping that thread alive, just keeping that thread that at some point can resurface and say, yes, and this is what impermanence is about. This is normal, this is natural, this connects me with all of life. All of life comes into being on the basis of certain conditions, persists for some time, and at some point when those conditions run out, the conditions change. They change, they disappear. So, as I said, there are several different bardos. There are 6 different bardos, and we'll hear the verses in the ritual at the end of the morning. But I'm not going to talk about all 6, but I do want to mention 3. So one is the bardo of meditation. And this is talked about as the practice of not falling into the power of confused emotions, those emotions associated with greed, hatred, and delusion. So not falling into the power of confused emotions, but over time training our minds so that we, if you like, fall more and more into the power of their opposites, into the power of love, of generosity, of patience, of mindfulness. Through the different practices that we have, training our minds, through the practice of awareness, mindfulness, moment by moment, moment by moment. So we're all very familiar with mindfulness, with meditation, our practice of meditation, and the ways in which it trains our minds, trains towards calm, towards tranquility, towards ease, trains us towards positivity, towards heart opening, and it trains us towards clear seeing, towards being able to meet reality, maybe just tiny moments at a time. So I'm going to skip through these bardos at a pretty quick pace. But I recommend the book. It's another world. In some ways it's a little bit like reading sci-fi, but with these Dharma nuggets in it. It's quite sort of wacky, and yet it really speaks in a very, very imaginative truth. So then the next of the bardos I want to talk about, which I think is number 4. So I'm talking about 3, 4, and 5. I think the meditation one is 3. So the moment before death, the bardo of the moment before death. And this is, in Tibetan Buddhism, is considered a really significant moment. The state of mind in which we die is considered, very important. Dying in a good state. So that's one way of looking at it, and you might think, well, yes, fair enough. Yeah, it's good to look after our minds and die in the best state that we can. And this is in the context of rebirth. So if you like, the state of mind at the end of one life seem to influence the what's the word? To influence in a beneficial way one's next rebirth. So it influences karma. This is about a sort of karmic stream, if you like, a stream of consciousness going from one life to another. But what's called death proximate karma is not the only sort of karma or influences that are working at the moment of death or whatever goes forward from death. So there are different types of karma. And this was explained to me by way of an image using wild horses. So it's like you've got wild horses in a corral. So they're really keen to get out. They've been sort of running around this corral. And then someone opens the door, or maybe we open the door at the moment of death. So death proximate karma is likened to the first horse out of the gate. It just happens to be near the gate. So it bolts out, off it goes, and runs off, and it's in the lead for a while. But there are other sorts of karma that catch up with it over time. So there's something called weighty karma. So weighty karma is really significant, or maybe acts, but significant beneficial or unbeneficial acts towards our spiritual life. So skillful and significant weighty karma would be things like dhyana in meditation, or insight experiences in meditation, or very strong acts of courage or benefit to others, but really, really significant, maybe saving a life. And then the negative weighty karma, strong acts of violence, murder or rape. So you can see why, if you like, they have an effect on our stream of consciousness, on our stream of being through our lives, whether or not you want to consider rebirth. Actually, those sorts of weighty acts, for good or for ill, have a strong effect. But then the third form of karma is what's called habitual karma. It's really how you've lived your life. The things that you've done over and over and over again, for good or for ill. So within one's practice, and quite possibly before that, within your life as a whole, there'll be many, many acts of kindness, of goodness, of patience or generosity. And there'll probably be many moments of impatience or irritation. So if you like, there's a bit of a balancing scale, and what we're looking to do in practice, if you like, is to create habits that will really help that, if you like, that wild horse of positive habitual karma get in front of all the others. So it is really important how we live our life, how we live our practice, how we live our life. Not just about being on the cushion, but really actively, positive, filling up that drop, as that image, filling it drop by drop. We fill a bucket with our positive actions. So that's a little bit about the karma of, the bardo of the moment before death, or the moment, just the moment of death, if you like. What do we carry with us? What do we carry forth with us? And then the next bardo is called the bardo of dharmata, shorthand for bardo of reality. And if you like, this is where the Tibetan Book of the Dead gets fully mythic. It's the full-blown sort of imagery comes into force here. What happens when we die? With the Buddha, this was his death after his enlightenment. So it was seen as the last sort of stage, or the last step in that enlightenment process, that he would not be reborn again. He would not sort of do the rounds of existence, coming back into a world with a fair amount of suffering. But how it's seen in the Dharma of the bardo of dharmata, this is where the opportunity is sort of writ large in this moment, the moment after death. We come face to face, the verses say, with reality. And that's, Alan was mentioning, this white light, this very, very, very bright white light, which symbolizes reality. And everything familiar, everything that we've known is stripped away at this point. Dr. Priya was saying earlier that it's so powerful, if you like, this experience is so powerful that usually the being swoons. I quite like this. We swoon from the power, but hopefully we sort of come back and have a wee look. Because if we can meet that moment of death, if we can be really open to all that confusion and disorientation, psychic disorientation, with everything familiar just gone, everything that we experience through the senses. Imagine still being, but without any of your sense experience. And what is there? What is there is confusing, is perhaps loud. It's perhaps a bit like being at a rave. When I've never been at a rave, so maybe it's not a good example, but it's a time of disorientation and fear. And if the white light, if it's all too much for us, if our current level of practice, we can't quite meet that, we can't stay with what's happening, then we turn away. We turn away, and the next thing that we meet are manifestations of color and light and energy in the forms of the peaceful Buddhas and Buddhas like wrathful Vajrapani, so the more wrathful figures, or if you're familiar with them, the female, the Dakinis, which can be pretty fierce as well. And all these other figures after the bright light, they're represented by the rainbow light, which is why I wanted it on the shrine. So if you like, it's just it's reality in a slightly less demanding form, slightly less in your face, but it's still quite overwhelming. And the feel overall is quite wild, quite chaotic, full of quite destabilizing imagery. And all of these things represent the truth. They all represent, if we can see them as simply the way that the mind is manifesting in that moment, the manifestation of forms of the mind. And if we can understand what's happening, if we can see this as the manifestation of mind, then the moment of death, the Dharmata bardo, can appear as really beautiful and like a beautiful, powerful dream, rather than a horrifying and terrible nightmare. So again, if we're not quite able to face those, and this is the white light is synonymous with reality. It's synonymous with enlightenment. So it's not surprising, if you like, that we can't stay with that experience. So we're turning more towards turning away from those fierce experiences. At a certain point, we turn towards something, we just spot something that we perceive as being a little bit familiar or a little bit safe. And that comes as a great relief. Often, something recognizable, something a little bit tangible. And in the readings, one of the readings later, you'll hear this phrase. It's quite an odd phrase. I think Parinirvana has the pleasure of reading it, and it mentions the womb door, close the womb door. And so this is about the process of rebirth. And that's in a way what's familiar to us. We've been doing the rounds of rebirth, the rounds of birth and death, whether in the moment in our lives, or the birth of the death of the moment, or the birth and death of our being. So we turn from fear to what we perceive to be safe, and round we go again. So that opportunity of the white light or of the colored rainbow lights gradually becomes further and further away, until we're, in a way, we're reborn, hopefully with the positive karma that allows us to come across a way of practicing again. Because it's by no means inevitable that life by life we encounter the Dharma. It's considered a very a thing of great fortune and a great opportunity in itself, just to have come across the Dharma in one's lifetime. There's an image, isn't there? There's the image of the, I don't know, 1,000 miles of ocean, and there's a ring. I don't know if it's a ring of seaweed or something, and it was as if a turtle just swimming within all this sea should pop his head up into this ring, inside this ring of seaweed or whatever it is, that's our chances of meeting the Dharma in that 1,000 square miles of sea. Yeah. So I'm running out of time a little bit. So one of the big things in the bardo, I'll have to be more concise, is working with fear. That's when we're in this zone of disorientation and shock and without familiar things. There's often quite a lot of fear, either fear or numbness, where perhaps we're just well, I suppose fear can manifest in different ways, can't it? Sometimes it's more sort of obvious and you're aware of it, and other times it's just a bit more frozen. We don't quite even know that we're afraid sometimes. So I was thinking it's important that we're able to explore our fear, but to explore it, if you like, from a place of safety. How can we learn to be with a degree of fear in whatever situation? I think in whatever situation in life, it's good training, if you like. Good training to be able to be with or to stay with what's happening. And I came across a really lovely image recently about practice. It put practice in this context of the guy was saying there are 3 things that we do in practice, and they're all important. And he said they're all related to a garden. So he said we can be in the garden. We can just be with what's happening, and that's really, really helpful, I think, often in relation to fear. He said we can pull up weeds. So all those manifestations of greed, hatred, and delusion, we can have practices that help clear our garden, and we can plant flowers. We can plant seeds of goodness, seeds of positivity, seeds of creativity. And between the 3, I think they allow us to work with fear, perhaps in a very small incremental way. But they allow us to sort of have enough resources to be able to work with fear and difficulty. One thing I wanted to say is that if we don't particularly experience fear, and we do have some degree of ease around the feeling of death, then to share that. I think it's quite a gift to be able to talk just openly and matter-of-factly around death, and to allow, in a way, allow others into that. And in fact, that's what I'm hoping that Sandra and Vajrapriya will be doing very shortly. But I just wanted to mention one of the things that the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about, how we can support others dying. I found this very, very strong. It talked about being a truthful and stable, reassuring presence. And I think this is particularly if we're with friends who are practicing and are really ill or are dying. In a way, it's working with that disorientation and confusion that comes through the dying process, where the dying person's grip on their senses becomes less strong. It's a natural part of dying, but to the degree that we can help someone work with that disorientation. I think perhaps this works on a level with disorientation. Fear can be disorienting, whether it's associated with death or not. So perhaps the same things apply, being able to be truthful What they suggest, they say, you are dying, you are leaving your friends and family. Your favorite surroundings will no longer be there. You are going to leave us. But at the same time, there's something which continues. There's the continuity of your positive relationship with your friends and with the teaching. So work on that which has nothing to do with ego. When you die, you will have all sorts of traumatic experiences of leaving the body, as well as your old memories coming back to you as hallucinations. But just relate, they say, with a basic warmth and a basic confidence when you're describing what's happening in the process of someone dying. So you're not sort of shying away from it at all. I think one of the things that can be really, really helpful, and if you like, what we can rely on our practice in terms of what we can take with us, this stream of good deeds or stream of consciousness. If we can use mindfulness to grow the ability to stay with what's happening through our lives, that will carry through into however the body manifests, however that moment of death manifests for us. Yes, I'm going to leave it there. I've chopped as much as I can. And I want to just move on to hearing from Sandra and from Vajradevi. So we'll go straight into that. We've not been sitting that long. So Sandra, would you like to go first? Would you like to go? So Vajradevi, could you unmute Sandra, please? Okay, she's unmuting herself. And can you pin? Yeah, you pinned her. Thank you. Sandra, you're still muted.
Yeah.
No,
I'm unmuted now. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you for all that. I've got a funny message on the screen, but I'll ignore it as long as you can all hear me, okay? So, not many weeks ago, I was listening to the news, and they announced that a well-known woman had died aged 83. That was a decent lifespan, I vaguely thought. I immediately jumped at the thought because I am a woman aged 83. Do I expect to die? No, I do not. The Buddha's recommendation to his monks for this state of mind was to go to the charnel grounds and contemplate the truth of impermanence. In our time, many people, and especially since the COVID pandemic, have experienced death from the outside, so to speak. They have known of the deaths of family and friends and the subsequent pain of bereavement. But what of one's own impending death? This being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This, the first part of the formula that the Buddha taught on dependent origination. Dependent on birth, old age, sickness, and death will follow. The suffering caused by the failing body in old age, I do have experience of. The disease of osteoporosis, common in older women, affects the bones of the body. Following an accidental, imprudent action I took 4 years ago, a couple of vertebrae in the spine collapsed. As I have grown older and weaker, the stress of the spine with daily life causes pain. To stop and rest for a while, then a necessity, causing frustration. The accident also tore muscles and ligaments in the back. These are now weakened and fail periodically. Many weeks of rest and healing follow, along with utter boredom. With the inability but rest, I turn to distractions. The same old ones go round and round. This is dukkha, the first of the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, that great spur to kickstart one's lapsed practice and stir up virya, energy in pursuit of the good, of the desire for the end of suffering, leading to enlightenment. One path the Buddha taught was that of the four satipatthanas, a four-step guide to enlightenment. Contemplation of the body, contemplation of feelings, contemplation of mind, and contemplation of dhammas. Before there is a refrain outlining the mental qualities one needs to develop and to apply to each contemplation. These are to be diligent, clearly knowing, mindful, and free from desires and discontent. So yes, to do our best to avoid the mental fog of boredom, to be fully aware of our goal, and free from desires and discontent. Surely that can't be right. What of the desire of dukkha, of discontent, and the desire to practice? And finally, what of death? Have I ever thought about my own death? Occasionally, yes, within certain contexts. Of course, the only way to see one's own death is through the imagination. And I imagine the sensation, the experience of zooming through eons of time and space with no destination. But, crucially, without desire or discontent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. Great. Yeah, very good to hear from you. So let's hear now from Vajradevi. Here.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about two forces that the Buddha talked about. He talked about craving, as you know. He talked about three kinds of craving. There's the everyday craving for sense experience. But then he mentioned the craving for existence and the craving for non-existence. So these last two, the craving for existence and non-existence, feels like two really strong currents of being, either of which can be dominant. So as a teenager, as an angst-ridden teenager, I experienced quite a bit of the craving to not exist. So I was suffering, as I'm sure lots of teenagers suffer. And I had this kind of ongoing fantasy, which actually came out of a film some of you may have seen called, I think, How to Murder Your Wife, where there's this, you imagine this button, and if you press this button, in my case, if I press the button, then I will have just disappear from existence. It's not that I'd die, it's just that I would never be and never have been. I'll just vanish completely out of ever having existed. And I used to check in with myself over, would I press that button? And I'd record this on my journal quite often, you know, how much did I want to press this button just to vanish from existence? Quite often, as it happened. I was never actively suicidal, but there's just this undercurrent of not wanting to exist, or wanting not to exist even. And of course, when we associate life with suffering, which we can easily pick up from the Dharma, then the only way to stop suffering is to stop living. So this is the force behind suicidal ideation and the act of suicide, isn't it? We want to stop suffering. The only way we can think of doing it is to stop existing. And I could even see this happening. This was about 23 years ago. There was a growth on my arm, which I went to the doctor, and it looked like it was cancerous. And I realized that it wasn't as if I was looking forward to dying, but it felt like a way out. It felt like almost a noble way out. I could die a noble death of an early death from cancer. And then I had a scan and it looked like it wasn't cancer. And I felt this whole sort of weight of being descending on me again. It's like, oh God, I need to carry on. As it happened, it was cancer and they removed it, and here I still am. But it was interesting to see again that force of wanting just not to exist, not want this burden of living. And another piece of the puzzle came out on my ordination retreat when I had another dip. This was back in a few years later, 2002. And I was having these sort of thoughts of, oh, if there's more pain than pleasure in life, what's the point? What is the point of living if there's just more pain than pleasure? And at this point, we were studying a text called the Bodhicharyavatara, where there's a line that goes something like, all those in this life who suffer do so because of their desire for their own happiness. All those in this life who are happy are so because of their desire for other people's happiness. So it's really sort of flipping the whole thing around to realizing that the way to happiness is just to get out of your own way, just get out of your own inward focus on my own happiness and just turn that attention outwards. And so I'll fast forward again a few years to 2008, when I was on retreat in Guilloca, as it happened again, in Spain, 3-month-long retreat in autumn 2008. And you may remember 2008, into this retreat came the news that the banks were all failing, that the banks were falling like dominoes. I'm not quite sure how this got into the retreat, but this is the news that followed. And there was, at this stage, 2 months of retreat. And my mind just kept going to the consequences of this. If the banks start failing, then people can't buy food. If people can't buy food, there'll be civil disorder. And there'll be a desperate scrabble for food. And what will I do? And where can I go? And how can maybe I can go to Scotland and farm my own food, and but then I'll have to protect my food from other people who want my food. And my mind was just going off in all these fantasies of how do I survive? And each of these fantasies ended one way or another with me dying. And it took quite a few of these fantasies before I realized all of these fantasies end in me dying, and that's what's going to happen anyway. No matter what, no matter what happens with the banks, that's going to happen anyway. So I need to work out my relationship to death. That's what my practice is, dealing with the fear of death. So this was me feeling the desire for existence, this strong desire to keep existing was coming out in these fantasies of ongoing, how do I live, how do I live, how do I live in this situation, how do I live, how do I live, how do I live? And so I can sort of feel these twin forces of the desire to exist and the desire to not exist. And of course, the Buddha's way isn't between either of those. It's working out a whole kind of different existential situation. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a little kind of snapshot of the inner life of Vajradevi in these, these twin forces of existence or non-existence. That's all I'll say. And hello to the people who've just joined us.
Morning, everyone. Sorry I'm a little bit late.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you both, Vajradevi and Sandra. Very moving. And just to say, Matt, the others of you that have just arrived for the drop-in. The drop-in today is being incorporated into something called Parinirvana Day, a festival day that we're having. So welcome to that. And so I'm going to hand over to Jairat. And I suggest we have just a couple of minutes leg stretch before we rejoin, and then Jairat is going to take us into the next bit of the morning, which will include a meditation.
Okay, thank you, Vajradevi. Thank you for that talk. Yeah, a couple of minutes leg stretch, and then we'll do a period of meditation, a combination of a Metta Bhavana and the Karuna Bhavana. So I'll see you all in a couple of minutes. I think we'll start the meditation part of this day. I'm a bit nervous about this, I must admit, because the Karuna Bhavana is not something I've led. I think I've probably led it once in my order career, which is quite long. And so when I started thinking about this, when Vajradevi asked me if I would do it, I said, oh yes, I'll do that. And when I came to trying to work out what I was going to do, it was a little bit difficult. I think I'll start by looking at a quote. And it's a quote from a French philosopher who said something like, there are two things which are difficult to do for very long. One is looking at the sun, and the other is looking at your death. And that struck me quite forcibly. So I began to think, well, what's my response to looking at my death? What's my experience of trying to do that? My first experience was it's very difficult. And the difficulty was that as soon as I started trying to do that, in meditation perhaps, right, I'll start to look at my death. And after a few seconds, often, I would start to think about, oh, I was going to cut my fingernails this morning, wasn't I? I haven't done that yet. Oh, isn't it time these curtains were washed? And all sorts of anything, rather than doing what I said I was going to do. In other words, there was a great disorientation. Vajradevi's used that word, disorientation and fear involved in this process. And I was also aware that I carried two different messages at the same time. One message was, yes, of course I'm going to die. I know that very well. And the other message was, yes, but not yet. It's not going to happen yet. And on some level, well, of course, it's not going to happen to me. So I was carrying these two opposing messages. And so when I came to look at, well, what are we going to do in the meditation? It's a question of, well, how are we going to approach this? If I've got this very strong aversion, I've got these very strong barriers to actually doing this, what's going to make it possible to even make a start? So I can only say how I approached it and share that with you and hope that in some way that's helpful. I do need to see that I'm dying. So perhaps rather than looking at death, looking at the process of dying, the process of diminution, the process of becoming less, the process of loss. And looking at the Buddha's teaching, I began to think that from the moment of conception, we're issued with a ticket. And the ticket is for the bus that's going to take us to the terminus. So we're all on the bus to the terminus. Some of us are nearer the terminus than others. I can see that it may not be so far for me. Some people have already arrived at the terminus, and this is what part of what today's about, is about remembering those people who are no longer with us, who have died, as well as looking at where we are with this process. The problem with being on the bus is that we don't know the route to the terminus. We don't know where the bus is going to take us, and we don't know how long it's going to be. So somehow we have to make some sort of preparation. And the difficulty with the preparation is the inability to look at what is actually going to happen. So when I start to look at my death, it's almost impossible to imagine that I don't exist at any length of time in the future. It's just inconceivable, because my whole world is me. And letting go of that seems almost impossible. And yet, I'm going to have to do it. So part of today, I think, is about saying, all right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to actually begin to get some sort of acceptance of the reality of what is going to happen at some time in the future? And one of the things that I came up with was the need to balance the death and the fear of death with loving kindness. In the suttas, there was a time when the Buddha suggested to the monks that they focused on decomposition of the corpse. And when he came back, he found that some of the monks had committed suicide, and said, well, in future, I think perhaps you should practice the metta bhavana. So the practice of metta, I think, is a way of beginning this process. And it's about having metta for who we are on a very basic level. On a body level. And looking at the fact that our body is continually dying and continually being renewed. And this is minute to minute. If we stop breathing for more than a minute or two, we're in trouble. If we don't warm our body, if we don't drink, if we don't eat, then the body decomposes. So what we need to do is to care for the body as long as we can. I have to apologize if you're getting a knocking sound on the soundtrack here. The man next door is spending Sunday doing DIY, and this might be coming across to you. Nothing I can do about that, so I must apologize. So what I want to do is to actually look at the meta for ourselves. All we have is our body and our consciousness, our mind and our heart. And to begin begin the meditation with that, and to look at compassion, that is what we have to deal with, and that is what every living being has to deal with, is stopping dying, continuing our existence. So I don't want to say too much else. I think we'll start the meditation. It's now 11:15, so we need to be doing the meditation before we have our break. So I'd invite you to get yourselves into a comfortable posture for a meditation. We're going to be sitting for about 30 or 40 minutes. So making sure that our body is as comfortable as possible. And that we become aware, as aware as we can, of how our body feels. So aware of sitting or lying down, aware of the support of the floor, the cushion, seat. Feeling the contact with the seat and the floor. Aware of the position, the posture of the body. Aware of the pleasant feelings, the unpleasant feelings. The neutral feelings. aware of our thoughts and our feelings, our emotions. What's in our mind right now? Developing feelings of kindness, acceptance, and warmth to everything we are. So aware of ourselves in total, keeping in contact with our breath and our body. Being aware of how much effort we have to make to maintain our body and our mind. Of how much we want it to endure, to stay as it is. Contacting that feeling of compassion for our loss. Maybe we're suffering pain, illness, loss. And being aware that that's how it feels, that's how our life feels. And wishing ourselves well. feelings of loss, bereavement, fear, anger, just accepting whatever is around for us. With kindness, with warmth, bringing to mind now, bringing into our meditation to join us. We invite a good friend. We wish the best for our friend. We're aware that they too suffer by being alive. By having to maintain the body and the mind, to deal with loss, and we empathize with their feelings. Their feelings and ours are similar. So for a few minutes, just staying with the friend, sharing compassion for self and them. The same compassionate response to being human. And now inviting in someone we don't know very well. Bringing them into the meditation. Recognizing that they are a person as we are, with the same emotions and feelings, the same wish to be happy. Recognizing their same fear of death as ourselves and the friend. Listen to your heart's response to that. bringing in someone to our meditation who we find difficult, bringing them in as wholeheartedly as we can. Setting aside our dislike, our reaction to them, to focus on the unsatisfactoriness of their life. Like us and our friend, and the person we don't know. The same fear, disorientation, dissatisfaction with the fact of our deaths. All four people in our meditation, we all share similar difficulty with looking at our death, reacting to it, ignoring it, disbelieving it, reacting in whatever way we can to make it safe. We're all on the bus. Bringing in more people, perhaps people on the screen in front of you, people in your family, your friends, colleagues, neighbours. Animals, all on the same journey. Maintaining those feelings of care, kindness, love, and compassion for all those beings. When our heart and mind wanders off, because we don't want to do this, let's come back to being aware of our body sitting or lying here. Feeling a warmth and a kindness to ourselves. Just keep coming back to that when it's difficult. And as we bring the meditation to a close, bring our attention back to ourselves sitting here, lying here. Wishing ourselves well. We're even beginning to contemplate our dying and our death. Letting go of that for a minute or two. Just sitting, just being here now. A few months ago, I was watching a video of Arnalio talking about meditation practice. And it's his strong opinion that if we only do one meditation, it should be the meditation on death. And he recognizes the difficulty of doing that. That if we are to have a good death, we need to practice. And I think I agree with him. I think I'm nearer the terminus than most of you on the bus. So time to get my luggage together so that I'm ready when the bus pulls into the terminus. So perhaps I could encourage you to do the same. You've longer than I've got. You might make a better job of it. I do hope so. So we have a few minutes before the leg stretch at 12 o'clock. Yes, break at 12 o'clock. If anyone's got any questions, any comments, I'd be really pleased to hear them. Do remember to unmute yourself if you speak.
Ratner, I'd just like to thank you wholeheartedly for leading that. With all the neighbouring banging going on, I think you did a sterling job. And yeah, I felt very touched by your words. So I'd just like to really thank you.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't too disturbing. Those of you who had your eyes open would have seen that I was moving from room to room in the house, trying to find somewhere where I couldn't hear the noise, and I failed. So I just hope that it wasn't too distracting.
Okay, yeah, all I'm going to say is, yeah, thank you, Jared. And yeah, I particularly enjoyed the bus imagery. I thought you spoke really beautifully about that. Very
Thank you.
lovely. So let's have a break. If you want to bring your tea back to the screen, that's fine. But otherwise, if you want to just take 15 minutes away from the screen, and we'll come back for the ritual. We'll start that around 12:15. Yeah, so we're not going to have breakout rooms. That was what was initially planned, but I think we just need a bit of the freedom to do what we need to do right now, just for the next 15 minutes or so. So we'll see you in a bit. Mantra of loving kindness. It's a verbal metta practice, if you like. Metta in voice. So if everybody could mute, and then just Karen will be unmuted. And if we have the mantra for maybe three or 4 minutes, if you can manage that, Karen. And so either join in with Karen on mute, so you'll hear her and you'll hear you, or it may be that you just want to sit and let it wash over you. It's very beautiful mantra, and Karen has a very beautiful voice. Yeah, so we'll just sit very briefly, and then you can start.
Om Maitri Maha Maitri Maitri Swaha. 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 Om Maitri
So we're going to move now into the final part of today, of our Parinirvana Day festival. Celebration, commemoration, reflection. So this is quite a simple ritual that brings us back to where we started with the bardos, the six root verses of the root verses of the six bardos. So I'm going to intersperse that with a ritual that probably you're quite familiar with, at least most of you, the threefold puja. So rather than go through it all, I'll just sort of flag things as they come up. But just to let Alan know that you'll be starting us off, Alan, reading the first two verses of the bardo. But we've been talking a lot about death, and maybe just to emphasize again that preciousness of the human birth. I talked about the turtle coming up, if you, in a way, the unlikeliness of a human being meeting the Dharma in this lifetime. But there's also within the Buddhist cosmology the unlikeliness of a human birth as opposed to a non-human birth. The importance of the human birth being it's where we can practice. Not only if we have the luck to meet the Dharma, as a human being, we're able to practice the Dharma. So even though a human birth is painful at times, it ends in death, it has that potential for freedom. So after the second verse from the threefold puja, we'll chant the refuges and precepts in unison. And again, if you're not familiar, you might just want to listen. You might want to join in if you're a bit familiar. And Vajradevi will share those on the screen. So they're there. And then right at the end, we're going to join. We're going to chant. It's a chant called Sabe Sata Sukhi Hontu. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. So I think that's the last thing, if you like, we're going to put out into the world. And we'll join in with a recording that's been made, if you like. So there's a few people chanting already and can just join in with them. Lost my bell. That's strange. Yeah. Ritual based on the threefold puja and the root verses of the six bardos. So we're going to hear verses 1 and 2 from Alan.
Now when the bardo of birth is dawning upon me, I will abandon laziness, for which life has no time. Enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation, making projections and mind the path. Realize the three kayas. Now that I have once attained a human body, there is no time on the path, for the mind to wander. Now, when the bardo of dreams is dawning upon me, I will abandon the corpse-like sleep of careless ignorance and let my thoughts enter their natural state without distraction, controlling and transforming dreams in luminosity. I will not sleep like any animal, but unify completely sleep and practice.
The threefold puja, opening reverence. So we'll do this in call and response. So just respond with Vajrapriya. We reverence the Buddha.
We reverence the Buddha,
The perfectly enlightened one.
the perfectly enlightened one,
The shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma.
We reverence the Dharma,
The teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
We'll hear verse number 3 from Marcia.
Now, when the bardo of samadhi meditation dawns upon me, I will abandon the crowd of distractions and confusions and rest in the boundless state without grasping or disturbance. Firm in the two practices, visualization and complete at this time of meditation, one-pointed, free from activity, I will not fall into the power of confused emotion.
Reference to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born
The Buddha was born
as we are born.
as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech, and mind until the end.
with body, speech, and mind until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha and aspire to follow it.
We reverence the Sangha and aspire to follow it.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
An ever-widening circle.
An ever-widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Refuges and precepts. We'll do these in unison. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Kamesu Mechachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Suramerya Maja Pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. With stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. With truthful communication, I purify my speech. With mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. So now we'll have Saravantu reading verses 4 and 5 of the 6 bardos.
Now when the bardo of the moment before death dawns upon me, I will abandon all grasping, yearning and attachment. Enter undistracted into clear awareness of the teaching and eject my consciousness into the space of unborn mind. As I leave this compound body of flesh and blood, I will know it to be a transitory illusion. Now, when the bardo of Dharmata dawns upon me, I will abandon all thoughts of fear and terror. I will recognize whatever appears as my projection and know it to be a vision of the bardo. Now that I have reached this crucial point, I will not fear the peaceful and wrathful ones, my own projections.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha, we offer flowers.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer flowers.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer candles.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer candles.
To him who is the light,
To him who is the light,
we offer light.
we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi shining within our hearts.
A lamp of Bodhi shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
Sweeter than incense.
sweeter than incense,
Spreads in all directions throughout the world.
spreads in all directions throughout the world.
We'll have Abhayanara reading the last verses from the 6 bardos.
Now when the bardo of becoming dawns on me, I will concentrate my mind one-pointedly and strive to prolong the results of good karma. Close the womb entrance and think of resistance. This is the time when perseverance and pure thought are needed. Abandon jealousy and meditate on the Guru with his consort. With mind far off, not thinking of death's coming, performing these meaningless activities, returning empty-handed now would be complete confusion. The need is recognition, holy Dharma. So why not practice Dharma at this very moment? From the mouths of the Siddhas come these words. If you do not keep your Guru's teaching in your heart, will you not become your own deceiver?
Sabe sata suki hontu. Sabe sata suki hontu. Sabe sata.
We have a little technical hitch, so we won't use the recording. I'll try and remember the tune. Feel free to join in. May all beings be happy, may all beings be well. Sabe sata suki hontu. Sabe sata suki hontu. Sabe sata Sukhi hontu sabbe sata. 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 Sukhi hontu. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and participating. I think there's been a really lovely feel this morning, very participatory and yeah, with a lot of depth. And I feel that conversation around death, I've seen that happening in different ways. I heard it happening in the break. So yeah, let's continue that and open to the opportunity that it brings. But anyway, thank you, and particularly thank you to Jayaratna for her beautiful meditation, and Vajrapriya and Sandra for their talks, and all the readers and the chanters for Karen for chanting, and Annie again for the shrine. Yeah, if you want to do send her a little text or WhatsApp. I'm sure she'd be delighted to hear. She's moving house very shortly, so was not able to come, and initially thought she wouldn't be able to help with the shrine, and then she just messaged me yesterday and said yes she could. Did we still want her to? And yeah, so at quite a stressful time for her, she's put herself out. Yeah.
And thank you, Vajradevi, for so skillfully and beautifully leading the day. Fantastic.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.